A meeting of the Flint Creek Creek Watersheds Partnership, hosted by Lake Zurich. Thank you so much, Mr. Brown. And we are delighted to have this opportunity to talk about the changing rainfall patterns in Lake County. We're expecting something, when you talk to some of the scientists, that over time it's going to be increasing as much as 40%. And that creates real challenges in terms of what to do with the water. We're Lake County, we've always had water, but over time, as we've had development and scraped off the topsoil, put down turf grass, gone into development with houses and roofs and parking lots and roads, it has changed the ability of the land to absorb and to retain the water. So it's a real challenge for us, and we're going to hear about what the opportunities are from the Lake County perspective, as well as what happens when a real disaster strikes and Lake County deals with FEMA to bring in resources. Then too, we have Michelle Pope, who is going to talk to us. She is an expert about GIS in terms of how our land is structured, what the drainage patterns are, and what the topology is. So this should be a most interesting session. And now, without more ado, we turn it over to you, Mr. Woolford.
Okay, thank you, Faye. Can everyone hear me in the back? All right. Well, Faye, you did the introductions, so thanks for inviting us. And we want to thank the Flint Creek and Spring Creek Watersheds Partnership, and then also Mike Brown with the Village of Lake Zurich for hosting us at this workshop and event. We have a lot of information we want to convey to the audience, so we thank the audience for attending too. Throughout the presentations, if anybody has any questions, you don't need to wait to the end, just raise your hand and we can address that. This is being streamed live on the local channel and then also on Facebook Live, and then after the meeting it will be available as a recording and uploaded to YouTube. So if you do have questions, we want to address your questions. If you could come up to the podium over here and then speak into the microphone for all questions. If you do need to use the bathroom facilities, they're right out this door here by the podium down the hallway. And that's all I had for administrative items. So once again, thanks for attending. I do want to ask a question. How many in the audience here had attended the previous rainfall meetings we had? We had one in Barrington, we had some other ones. By a show of hands, how many attended those meetings? Okay, so a few of you were there, so I just want to get an idea of maybe some of this material you have seen, but a lot of others haven't seen it, so you might have already seen this, but I do want to run through that. So getting started, the agenda this morning, I'm going to start off with some technical information, some graphs, not the most exciting stuff, but what we're seeing internationally, regionally, locally, what's going on with the rainfall. Then a little bit on stormwater and floodplain management and the approaches that we use to mitigate flood damages in Lake County. And then we're going to narrow in a little closer to the Echo Lake drain area that we've been aware of a drainage situation for many years. And it's a very interesting situation, so we'll get into some more detail on that. Michelle is our drone pilot. She's here. She's going to go over some information that she collected when she did a drone flight over the Echo Lake drain area. And then Sharon's going to talk about grant funding opportunities, including FEMA and different resources that are available. And then if we have time, I've got some additional information about flood safety and flood-proofing tips. So we do want to keep this meeting under 2 hours. If we have time, we'll cover that last item. So just to start out, at a very national level, the federal mandate to publish this climate assessment every 4 years, and the last one was in 2017. And these are the real smart people in the room. You know, there's hundreds of scientists and other professionals that assess and model and look at what's changing in our climate. And regardless of our opinions, there's the facts that what is being observed out there with additional rainfall. We've seen it locally here. But this report was published, and the two main takeaways that I feel are important are the second bullet right there. So precipitation will continue to increase. There's a medium confidence that that is going to continue. That trend is moving in that direction. And then the third bullet is pretty important, that heavy precipitation events will increase in frequency and amounts. There's a high confidence that we're going to have these larger, intense storm events more frequently. We're seeing more and more of those types of events. Now, also as part of that climate assessment, they looked at, the entire United States area, and our area, the upper Midwest, you can see is the highest chance for the change in the top 1% of the extreme rainfall events. So the top 1%, when you hear the term 100-year storm, you think, okay, that's the storm that's only going to happen every 100 years. It's really misleading. It's a very poor label to assign these storm events. It's all based on probability. So really, the 1% storm, there's a 1% chance we're going to have this real extreme event. And you probably hear it every couple years. We just had the 100-year storm. We just had another 100-year storm. So it gets not the greatest way to address these storm events. So, but you can see on this figure here, the upper Midwest, 42%, we're going to see a larger increase in these storm events for extreme rainfall. Now, other areas of the United States are not seeing as high, and some areas are seeing droughts, and we're also seeing that globally, what's going on in Australia. But if we just go across the Atlantic over to Europe, we wanted to just look at how is Europe handling this. And we're also doing this locally, but a lot of countries in Europe, they're identifying that the rainfall patterns are increasing, and they're changing their design standards. So the countries listed there's a reference in there, but they are increasing their infrastructure sizing to account for this increased rainfall as well and precipitation. So I just wanted to share that we're not the only ones out there. Now, there's various resources of data out there. So the rainfall that we observe and we collect and measure is utilized in a few different ways. And one of it is for determining floodplain elevations. One of it's for sizing infrastructure, sizing detention ponds. How high should a home be built? Ela Township Highway Department's in here. How big of a culvert do they need under their road? So that rainfall is one of the variables that goes into those calculations to determine sizing. You need a bigger pipe. Your house needs to be higher. The floodplain has grown. These publications here, they change throughout time. And just wanted to share that the first one, Technical Paper 40. It's not from the 1940s, it's more like the 1960s, but that was a data set that was used, and then it became outdated. Then we had Bulletin 70, then we have Atlas 14, and now we have this new rainfall standard that the Illinois State Water Survey has published, and we are working towards implementing those rainfall standards, which are going up. And what that's called is the updated Bulletin 70. They're going to relabel it Bulletin 75. So when you hear Bulletin 70, Bulletin 75, that is the published rainfall data for the state of Illinois. And all counties and communities in Illinois use that information. It's best available data. It's not using forecasted rainfall. It's looking at statistics of observed rainfall. And I'll get into that in a little more detail here. This is part of the issue of the old rainfall data. So on the left, if you can see, those are the Cook County and Collier County area. We're in the Northeast Illinois area. It's an urbanized area. If you get outside of Northeast Illinois, it's less developed, it's more rural. But the Lake County information has, and it's hard to see, but at Waukegan, there's one rain gauge there, and that rain gauge collected rainfall information over 100 years, and based on those old statistics, they came up with a number, and that number was 6.5. So 6.5 is that magic number for the 100-year storm. So if you get 6.5 inches in a 24-hour period, that's the 100-year storm. But it's very outdated, and it's very isolated. It's this one rain gauge bucket at the Waukegan Airport that does not represent all of Lake County, and that proved to be true in 2017. So on the right, this here is the July 2017 flood event. How many people remember that? Come on, there's more people that remember that one. We all remember that storm. And the different colors on there show where the highest rainfall landed in the watersheds. And that was a major flood across all of our watersheds. We have the Des Plaines River, the Fox River, the North Branch, and Lake Michigan. And our watersheds operate differently. So the North Branch of the Chicago River, that originates in Lake County. So the rainfall that lands in Lake County, we get instant flooding, and then it drains out within 12 hours. Then all the flooding's gone. The Des Plaines River, the rain falls in Lake County, but it also falls in Wisconsin, and there's about a 2 to 3 day lag time for that wave to come down into Lake County. The Fox River has an even larger watershed in Wisconsin, and sometimes there's a week before we see the peak. So it can be sunny and no rain in the Fox River watershed, and we're telling people to sandbag because the rain is hitting in the upper basin and it's coming down the Fox River, and it'll be here in a week. So we've gotten pretty good at identifying where the rainfall fell and how to coordinate with emergency management and other partners for flood fighting. But what I wanted to show on this figure here, on the upper northeast corner on the rain gauge, that's the Waukegan rain gauge, and it did not really receive a lot of rainfall during that 2017 event. So using that one bucket to represent Lake County is really not accurate, because we had up to 8 to 10 inches sometimes in the center part of the county. I live in Libertyville. My entire street was flooded. I couldn't leave. We had a lot of major flooding in central Lake County, but northeast Lake County didn't receive as much rainfall. So looking at a more regional approach to the rainfall, let me advance the slide. I'm trying. Maybe it powered off. There we go. The updated Bulletin 70 that the State Water Survey conducted, they used even more rain gauges throughout the state of Illinois. I think there's 60-some gauges out there, and this represents all those locations. And they also used a newer time period. The time period used to be from the early 1900s to 1980. And then that's the rainfall standard we use. But with current rainfall patterns that have been changing, they wanted to look at a more current period of time. So this period of time now looked at 1948 to 2017. And they also had more gauges, more information. And they worked on this for a couple years. This here is part of the data set that illustrates the total amount of rain, annual rainfall, from early 1900 to, pretty much current to 2015 when they finished their analysis. And overall, the total annual amount of rain, it goes up and down. There's periods of extreme precipitation. You get a lot of rain like we had last year, and farmers couldn't plant crops. And then there's periods of drought where you're not getting a lot of rain. So you're seeing it spike up and down. But when you look at the moving average of what that trend looks like for the total amount of rain over the last 100 years, it's climbing. The trend is increasing. And if you look closely, there's kind of two different cohorts of data. The first part, it looks pretty flat up till around 1960 or so. It's climbing up, but it's pretty flat. But then from 1960 to today, now you're starting to see this steeper ascent in the total amount of rainfall. So that's starting to climb, and that trend is continuing. This is more of a straight line trend. If you just look at the beginning of the data set and just want to figure out what that average trend line is moving throughout the century, it's showing an increasing trend. This is for all the engineers in the room. I'm sure you've seen this data, but how do you size detention ponds? How do you size storm sewers? How do you size floodplains? Like we were talking about earlier, that 6.5 inch number, that was the number that we all used when you build a subdivision and a detention pond. That detention pond has to be sized for 6.5 inches. Well, with the new rainfall, I'm going to try this button, see if this works. There, yeah. So we go to the 100-year column, and then we come down to the 24-hour storm, and that number now is 8.57. So it's a more than 2 inches jump in the design rainfall that is used. So these detention basins are going to need to be larger. Storm sewers are usually designed using the 10-year storm. So the 10-year storm, all of these rainfall numbers are going up. So storm sewers for new development will need to be larger. So that's where we're at currently. And the State Water Survey also looked at some climate modeling into the mid-21st century and late 21st century, so 2050 and 2090. And it's out there, but it'll be here before you know it. And they looked at this for Cook County, DuPage, Lake, and Will County. And in those counties, they did some robust climate modeling. And when they do climate modeling, it's not just one model. They have a dozen models that they run with different variables. They're running one model that has these assumptions, another one that has these assumptions, and out of a dozen models, they try to see, we have a 90% confidence that all these models are telling us this is where we're heading. So a model is just a model. It's a forecast. Anything could happen. But based on their climate models, where they have some agreement, these charts are kind of hard to read, but they do show that the Lake County area, we will be experiencing higher rainfalls than the other counties in the area. So they're going to continue to climb. And some of the numbers in the 2090 scenario, the late 21st century, one of the models showed that the rainfall that we're experiencing now is going to double. That was one of the scenarios. But none of their models showed rainfall decreasing. So we're moving in this trend that we want to be prepared for the future. We want to make sure that homes that are built now are not going to be subject to flooding in the future. So we want to incorporate some higher design standards now, not just to protect from today's storm events, but also into the future. So if the rainfall is increasing, why is that important? So this might be obvious for everybody. And when we used to present on this slide, we used to just focus in on the urbanization of the watersheds. As you lay down more impervious surface, as more homes are built, as more commercial areas are built, as more parking lots are built, more sidewalks, more hardscaped areas get developed on our watersheds, the water can no longer infiltrate into the ground. It's not readily absorbed in the vegetation, and it just runs off. So there's a higher runoff potential on that right figure when areas get developed. And that's why we have a watershed development ordinance that is implemented countywide, and we're continuously updating that. We're working on it right now. But just due to the fact of urbanization and the increased runoff, we would have stormwater management requirements. But one enhancement we made for this slide is we made the clouds a lot bigger now. And there's like a lot more rain now. So we're getting it from both ends, you know. Flooding is probably going to continue. That's safe to say. And we want to make sure new development is adequately protected from that flooding, and also existing subdivisions, existing homes, and existing businesses surrounding these new developments are not adversely impacted. Why is it important in Lake County? Well, it's called Lake County for a reason. We have over 190 water bodies. The subsoil in Lake County is a lot of clay, and that's why we have so many lakes, because water can't readily drain into the aquifers, and it gets perched up in these wetlands and water bodies, and they're great resources. We all love living near the lake, but they are not good at infiltrating water. So when we do get these heavy rain events, we see widespread flooding in all watersheds. So the amount of floodplains, the amount of wetlands, the amount of hydric soils that once were wetlands and then were drained by the agricultural community, those are still out there. About 20% of Lake County is wet. So just a little bit about SMC. We were established in 1990 through legislation, and it was really in response to the 1986 and 1987 floods. And the mayor of Gurnee, Richard Welton, went down to Springfield and said, you know, the municipalities are doing a good job of managing stormwater, but flooding is a regional problem. It doesn't stop at political boundaries. There needs to be a more regional approach to managing stormwater. So that's how a lot of the northeast Illinois counties were enabled to create stormwater programs like ours. And we manage floodplains through the ordinance, through regulations, but we also have other programs and projects where we mitigate. Sharon will talk about some of the programs that we work on. But public education and outreach is a huge component too. And it's come a long ways, where in the beginning, stormwater management, it's like, well, you know, we have sanitary sewers and we have water mains. We know how our utilities work, but stormwater and watershed approaches, they've come a long ways, and I think a lot of acceptance is, you know, just by these watershed partnership groups. You know, these probably didn't exist 20 years ago. So it's great to see that there's these opportunities and everyone's, you know, interested in becoming educated on these. Best management practices, green infrastructure, those are terms that probably not a lot of people knew of, but I'm sure a lot of people in this room do know about best management practices and green infrastructure now. I did talk about our ordinance, so I do want to cover a few items. You know, so we do regulate new development. We don't regulate old development. So if an old home is in an older neighborhood and is subject to flooding, and I mentioned storm sewers need to be increased, there's no regulatory authority that I'm going to tell Ela Township, you need to go upsize your storm sewers. But they're already doing that, you know, as they find their problematic areas, and every local unit of government is doing the same thing. They're seeing that certain infrastructure needs to be increased to alleviate their flooding. But for new development, that's where the Watershed Development Ordinance comes in. And that is not just created by us. We have a technical advisory committee, and we seek to have a very balanced input decision on how that ordinance is reasonable. So what's reasonable for a developer? What's reasonable for someone in the environmental sector? What's reasonable for the county? What's reasonable for all the municipalities out there? We have that cross-section of representation on our technical advisory committee, and we seek to have unanimous consent on what we're proposing for these rules. We do it in a public forum, and you're all invited to our TAC meetings if you want to attend those. We delegate our permitting authority to most of the communities. So a lot of the communities have a village engineer. A lot of communities have a permit department. So for those communities that don't want to have the option to issue these permits, we can do that. So about 41, there's 52 communities in Lake County. Of those, 40 are certified. So that ordinance, we certify a community. They have the professionals on staff that are qualified to administer that ordinance, to enforce it, to inspect sites. They can do that. And then there's communities that, for whatever reason, they might not have the staffing resources, Or there's even communities that want like a second set of eyes. Like, we're going to look at the development. We also want SMC and our principal wetland specialist and our other permit engineers to also have a second set of eyes on the development because they have flooding problems in their communities. So not all permits are issued by us. I did want to put a plug in for our new permitting system that we're going to be rolling out this year. And we are trying to become 100% paperless in our permit process. So applicants would be able to go to this Lake County portal, submit plans online, pay your fees online, and then in the back end of the office, we're going to be reviewing digital plans on a monitor. So we're trying to get away from paper. Not only will that be friendly for the environment, but it's going to streamline the permit workflow as well. It used to be you would, Brian knows, you'd print out a giant roll set. I don't know how long that would take. And maybe you'd have to print out 5 of those and then drop it off at the office. We'd have to log it, put it in a bin. One of the departments might take it. Hopefully no one loses the plans and mark them up, then send out your counts. But now online, the plans can be digitally uploaded, and then all of our departments can simultaneously review it at one time. We can even create sessions where we'll invite Brian to look at it. Maybe we won't. Then you can see what we're talking about. We can ask you questions. So that's this portal. It's going to be rolling out. If you're not an applicant or you're not doing these projects, I'm sorry you had to listen to all that, but it's kind of an exciting thing on the regulatory side that we're dealing with. And this just illustrates that there's many different participants in the project team. We have our permit reviewers, we have our inspectors. The applicant has what the owner's looking for, their design engineers, their architect. And this new platform will be able to kind of integrate and streamline that whole process for permitting.
Question, is that just for non-certified communities, or are all certified communities going through that portal as well?
Currently, this is a Lake County software, so it's going to be for all county permitting departments. We have we're piloting with a couple communities to allow communities also to be a part of that. But for right now, it's just, if you have to go to the county, then it would just be for county departments. And that's one of the improvements that we made over the last decade was the county departments used to be decentralized. Our office was in Libertyville, the planning department was in Waukegan, the health department was in a different location, and that was a complaint that you're a customer, you're an applicant, you have to get a permit, and you're being told to go here, then there, and, we went to Libertyville. We have this facility, the Central Permit Facility. It's a one-stop shop. You can get all your answers at one location. We have project managers that can help facilitate that. So it's a customer enhancement that I think has been working very well. We've been getting good feedback on that. But then I think this also helps answer the question. In the county, we have the Stormwater Management Commission. We issue permits, planning, building, and development. They handle all the unincorporated areas. So they're also a certified community, but we coordinate with them. The Division of Transportation for Lake County, all of their roads, if you need to get an access permit or you're putting in a large development, you need to put in a right turn lane, you're needing permits from DOT. The Health Department, they're issuing permits for wells and septics and other areas that they regulate. And then Public Works for wastewater and water mains in areas that they serve. So there might be a project that comes in that needs a permit from all of these entities. And we can all coordinate and make sure that I'm not telling someone that's going to be in conflict of another department. So really trying to improve and streamline the permit process. Yeah, if you don't mind, if we can get questions to the podium, I'm sorry, that's what I was told.
This is just a quick one. What determines the need for an SMC permit?
Sure. Good question. So we have thresholds for our permits, and our thresholds are a little larger in scale. So if you're going to be building a deck on a house, most likely you don't need a permit. The large triggers for a watershed development permit from us, I always look at the 5,000 square foot rule. If you're going to be disturbing the ground, hydrologic disturbance, like turning dirt, and there's going to be more than 5,000 square feet in total, that's an easy trigger to see if you're doing more than that. But there's a bunch of them. Another one is, are you going to be impacting floodplains? Are you going to be putting some fill in a floodplain that has to be mitigated? That pretty much is any time. If you're near wetlands, are you going to be impacting wetlands? So if you're doing that deck and you have to fill in a wetland, that's going to need a permit. Or if you're going to fill in a floodplain. But the easy one is the 5,000 square foot. Now that's for SMC, and communities can be more restrictive, and some of them are. So those thresholds might be lower. It might be 1,000 square feet. I think Barrington Hills, is anybody from Barrington Hills in here? They have a lower threshold, I know that. But that's in the ordinance, and if you have follow-up questions, I took those slides out, but I can get you that information too. Okay, so now we're going to dive into the Echo Lake drain floodplain area. And so this is an interesting drain here. So if you can see on the screen here, we've got Lake Zurich down here. And actually, I was looking at some old maps. Does anybody know what Lake Zurich was called before it was Lake Zurich?
Cedar Lake.
Yeah. Actually, the old plat that the old plat that I saw from the 1840s, it was called Impassable Cedar Lake. So okay, good. People know that one. But
Can you get that screen up?
Yeah, I think she went to get somebody.
okay, yeah, I can pause. Faye, did that screen cut out? Okay.
He knows, he's going to repair.
So Cedar Lake. So why was it renamed Lake Zurich? Does anybody know that?
Seth Payne went to Switzerland.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Seth Payne went to Switzerland.
Seth Payne went to Switzerland.
Liked it.
Okay, and then he came back from his trip and said, we're not calling it Cedar Lake anymore.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. That's it.
All right. That's the way things, well, we've had requests to change rivers in Lake County too. So that's something that we have to follow up on a couple of them out there. When you change names, it's not always probably going to get consent from everybody. Some people are clinging to those old names, but all right. The outlet for Lake Zurich, down here at the bottom, drains out through a control structure, and the property owner for that control structure is the Lions Club. There they are. So the Lions Club, you own that outlet structure, and SMC's role in controlling lake levels is we don't have a role. We don't have the authority, and we can regulate development, but lake levels setting high or low, that is not something that legally we can mandate that the lake is too high or the lake is too low. That is outside of our purview of authority. But what we can do is offer technical assistance. If there's data, we can assist in trying to make determinations, we can do that. But we cannot tell people what those lake levels should be. So sorry that the other screen is not on, but I'm gonna keep talking if you don't mind. Now the Echo Lake drain, the outlet for Lake Zurich travels through that outlet structure, through a wetland complex, up to Lions Drive, and I think currently there's a submerged culvert there. You can't see it, so there's conveyance. Water is draining. But it's submerged. We see a lot of those in the county where these culverts you don't know where they're at, you can't see them, they sink over time, but it's draining, but we don't have good information on where and what size. I'm sure others in the room might have that information. But then it's in this larger wetland complex. Then it comes up to, what's this road? South Lakewood. Yeah, so South Lakewood, there was some new culverts installed by Ela Township, I recall. They put in some new culverts. And then you get into the Echo Lake itself. And I have another slide here. This shows a larger view. What's happening north of Echo Lake. Then there's an outfall under, now help me out with this road. North Lakewood. So there's also a structure here that's controlling the lake level, and then it gets into this tributary through the wetlands and out to Flint Creek. And this line that you see cutting through the lake right here is labeled as an abandoned sanitary. And I don't know the history, but I've learned just from talking to people and some other resources that, you know, in the early 1900s, there might have been an old wastewater treatment facility, and that effluent that was being processed was routed into this pipe, and that pipe ran all the way out here to the Flint Creek and daylighted out there. So there's this old pipe that was this effluent line for sanitary. And then when the wastewater treatment plant was abandoned and no longer being used, that was probably demolished and all that, but that pipe always remained. And what that pipe does is it actually is serving as a drain pipe for all of the water that's coming out of Lake Zurich into these wetlands up to South Lakewood and draining into this pipe. And then that pipe goes underneath. This location here is probably not perfect. Someone just drew a line. We don't know where that pipe is, but there is a pipe somewhere. So water is draining into a structure right on the south side of Lakewood and then going underneath the lake. And the lake is actually higher than the wetland to the south. Usually water flows downhill, lake levels are lower as you progress down a river, but this is different. The water levels here drain into this pipe, and this wetland is actually lower than Echo Lake to the north. So when we started looking at this 7 years ago, the concern was, well, there's all this flooding going on in these wetland areas. Echo Lake is okay from what we've been told, but this pipe is the only outlet to really keep these wetland water levels low. And if this pipe under Echo Lake would ever break or would ever fail or would ever have some kind of failure where Echo Lake could drain into it, you would wake up one morning and Echo Lake would be gone. It would have all drained out. And we're like, well, that's probably not good.
The wetlands?
Say again?
Would it drain into the wetlands then?
It would drain out this pipe. So right now, the wetlands to the south are all draining through this pipe and outletting down right where the cursor is right here. And Michelle will show you some information that she flew with Ela Township. They did a dye test, and they found where they put the dye in this location. About 45 minutes later, like, because no one knew, like, where's this pipe going? I call it the mystery pipe. I don't know where it's going. But then the dye started seeping out right here. So like, all right, that's awesome, because there was no dye in Echo Lake, so that means it's closed for now. And yeah, if that pipe ever collapsed under Echo Lake, all of Echo Lake would drain out. The wetlands to the south would not drain out because they're still controlled by a structure. There's a manhole structure with a lid, and water has to pour into that. So I don't think if this pipe failed under Echo Lake that there would be any changes to the south. But what we were thinking is well, if Echo Lake drains out, and I'm sure you want your lake back. Are there any folks from Echo Lake here? Right. Do you like your lake?
Love it.
You love it. So you probably would not want to see a large hole in the ground. You'd want the lake back. Okay? So the easiest way to get your lake back is just to plug the pipe down here, right? Like, all right, well, let's plug the drain, right? And then we'll get our lake back. But if you plug that drain, you get your lake back, but then all of a sudden everybody to the south here no longer has that outlet pipe to rely on. And all of the wetlands, all the way up to Lake Zurich, would be at the same level as Echo Lake. And right now these are all lower. And there are probably some folks in the crowd here that live within these live on the adjoining properties down here. Are there anybody here that are in there? Yeah. So your water levels are higher than normal, correct?
Yes.
Yep. So you wouldn't want them any higher, right? Right. So we looked at some options, and we only looked at it from a preliminary concept. You know, what could be done to mitigate this? This is a large multi-jurisdictional project. You know, you have Lake Zurich, you have unincorporated Lake County, you have Ela Township, you have North Barrington, right? No, Hawthorne Woods downstream, and the community of Echo Lake, and then the landowners down here. So one option we looked at, well, we don't want this pipe to fail, so there could be this in situ pipe form where they run a device through there, and then they kind of armor the inside of the pipe so it has some life to it. But who knows where that pipe is, you know, the alignment of it. Sometimes you might be trying to do a good thing and all of a sudden the whole thing just blows up on you, and then you're like, what do you do? The other option was, well, put a new pipe in. You know, get a new outlet pipe from this wetland under Echo Lake. So the Echo Lake folks in the crowd, you probably wouldn't want your lake any lower, right? Right? You got boats and all that. You want to say again?
Like it deeper.
Like it deeper. So one way to make it deeper is to make the water higher, right? So that's the problem that we see all over the county. The boaters, they want it deeper, so they dam things up. And then the people who flood, like those boaters, you know, let's tear that thing down. So it's a constant battle. We see it all over. But yeah, we agree that the level of Echo Lake should be maintained. And the level down here needs to be alleviated. So a new pipe under the lake, around the lake, and there's different ways of putting in a new pipe. There's directional drilling where you can just install a pipe without affecting the lake. But several years ago, one option, it wasn't my idea, so I'm not, but it has been done, is that you do drain the lake. You drain the lake and you install a new pipe, and then you let it fill back up. So that might be an option to put that new pipe in. And then a third option was, let's put in some other control structures at these road crossings. But I don't know how well that's going to work, because this area here needs to be drained down some more. And so we've been meeting with the village and Ela Township, and that's kind of the stage we're at. We're aware of it. We know it's a tricky area. There's other options that could exist out there as well. So we've had it on our work program for a while, because we're like, the time to act, if Echo Lake does drain out and I get a phone call and said, like, hey, our lake's missing, like, all right, well, we got to make sure we fix that. But so far it's been operating where Echo Lake's good, but the flooding to the south is increasing. Now, that could be for a variety of reasons. That pipe might be getting clogged up, and the capacity is not as doesn't have as much flow that it used to be able to handle. One thing that we have been seeing, when I talked about in the beginning of the presentation, is the rainfall itself. We're getting a lot more rain. The ground is super saturated, and it's just taken longer time for these watersheds to drain out. And a lot of high water areas in lakes and in ponds, in yards, so we're seeing that. But we do want to keep an eye on this one, and we have some concepts that we want to continue to explore. But yeah, our concerns for this one is we don't want Echo Lake to vanish someday, and we also want to alleviate the flooding south. So something we're continuing to work on. And I guess with that, I want to let Michelle kind of cover what she observed with her drone flight, working with Ela Township. Do we need you want to go up there and talk? Okay, so Michelle's going to come up. She's got a cool drone flight that she's going to show, and we can definitely see some of these high water level areas. And are there any questions before Michelle gets started? Yes, sir.
Real quick, any ballpark idea on the diameter, size of that pipe?
Of the old pipe? You know, I was talking with Mike about that last week, and I thought I saw a number around 12 to 10 or 12. Yeah. So it's not a large pipe, and that's going to drain out at the capacity that what that can handle. So the amount of water that Lake Zurich is discharging, it's almost like its own detention pond. It's only going through a smaller pipe, and the capacity of that original 10 or 12-inch pipe, there might be debris and other obstructions that are in there that's causing it to further, slow down the draining. So yeah, if anybody does have information on that, I'd be happy to collect that and learn more about it. But that's the only exhibit I had that showed that there was a pipe, and I recall that size. All right, any other questions? Yes?
I have some questions. I don't know if you want to wait till the end. I understand that there's additional increase in rainfall, but eventually it should drain. I back up to the wetlands, and it's been flooded for 2 years now going on. It drains, it recedes a little bit, but nothing, I've been there 17 years, nothing like it's ever done. So I understand the increase, but the drainage isn't there. It's not occurring the way it used to.
Yep.
And I know there was a new culvert put in Echo Lake off of Lakewood. Just curious if they pulled a permit, if they, from you guys, because I don't know if it's at the same level as it was. It seems like ever since they redid that culvert, the wetlands have been flooding.
Right. A couple things there. So one, yes, there was a permit, and from what I've been told, I looked at it many years ago, but I guess I'll ask the township this question. It's what I recall the current situation is the water is pouring into the manhole structure, and then it's draining out, right? It's actually dropping into it. So the fact that you've got a structure that's controlling that water level, but once it can get inside that manhole, it drops into it. The drainage there is handling that. If the pipe was not able to handle what was dropping into it, you would see water surcharging above the structure itself. So as long as that water level in the structure is below the wetland, it's showing that there's enough water and pressure to push its way through. Now, I don't know if there's been period.
Culvert's determined by the Echo Lake height. So any lower on that culvert, Echo Lake will go backwards into that wetland. And you can see that under heavy rains that it feeds back and then drops into the pond.
Right.
So the height of that pipe and the pitch of that pipe is to take on the maximum drainage from the wetlands without bringing Echo Lake back into those wetlands.
But Echo Lake, it is, I think, slightly back pitched, or not, or the culverts.
Yes.
So the water level of Well, let me ask this question. The water that's coming out of Echo Lake and then the water that's coming from Lake Zurich into that structure, the water's still dropping into it. So that pipe has capacity. Now, if there is an obstruction or failure where now that structure, water can no longer drop into it, it's surcharging, it's going up, then there's a problem. So right now, yes, the water levels are high, but it might be, there's a lot of might be's. So yeah, we're looking into that, but the observation that that structure, water drops down into it, I believe that that pipe is handling the water that's going into it.
Well, something changed in the last 2 years. So,
Yep. And I don't know what the entire, Brian might know. I'm putting you on the spot here. What's like the total tributary area of Lake Zurich?
Oh, I don't have it on, it's not big, actually.
It's not?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's basically the headwater of that branch of Flint Creek.
Yeah.
Road 12 is kind of sort of the ridge line, and there's some stuff that goes across it, but it's not a lot of water.
Okay. So we know there's a problem, and it's in multi-jurisdictional, so we're looking at it. That's part of the reason why we're here today, and it's a part of the agenda. So yeah, we want to figure it out for you. We want to fix it for everyone. All right, so we got the screen back, and Michelle's turn.
Can you, whoa, okay, sorry about that. Well, so now I get to talk about something fun about drone flights. Before I get into Echo Lake, I'm just going to explain like what I can do for you when I fly the drone. So, let's see if this works. So the reasons SMC uses the drone is primarily flood response. We don't want our teams to go out into dangerous situations and potentially get hurt or harmed. So during the September flood last year, actually, we found 3 failed drain tiles on Route 120 without a single person getting wet besides actual rainfall. So we didn't have to go into the wetland, we didn't have to go into the water and potentially harm ourselves. So we were able to actually save time and potentially people getting hurt. So. And then another one is inspections. Instead of flying like a whole site or walking a whole site, we can fly the site within half or quarter of the time, and then actually get a big picture of the site and overlay the plans and see if the silt fence is correct, see if it's going on time, and other stuff like that. And then another one is regulatory authority. We use the drone just to see if the vegetation is growing back correctly, if the slope is correct, because we have to have a 2-to-1 slope in order for it to be good enough for ROK. And I can see if from contours that the drone produces, I can see and calculate the slope from that. To set up a drone flight, I need to know kind of what you guys want. So, like, I need to know what you want as an end product. What do you want to accomplish? There's 3 or 4 kind of things that I can do with the drone. I can do photos in a video and put a little drone inset to for an overview to see where the drone actually is. I can create 2D products, which is like the big picture I was talking about. I can create contours, and I can create a DTM. And then there's also 3D models where you can actually fly and turn and tilt this model to of the 3D to like for buildings and structures like that. If it wants to load. There you go. I'm just going to pull up the flood response video that I took. should be moving.
You definitely have our attention.
Where is that?
This is actually Granwood Park up in Gurnee. This is right outside our, because we constructed the dam. This is right outside during the September 2019 flood, and if the video would play, you can actually see that I'm trying to fight the wind. It was, I'm guesstimating around 20 to 30 miles per hour, and I was not used to that. And so I was fighting the wind with the drone, and I was trying to maneuver, and I couldn't really see where the drone was because of the sun, and I couldn't really see due to the wind and all that stuff. So it was hard flying that, but you can see there's a lot of water. So sorry that it's not playing correctly, but let's see if the Echo Lake one would play. Oh, that one does. So there's the little drone inset I was talking about. So as the video goes on, you can actually see where I was flying in comparison to with the drone map. So I sped it up a little bit so you guys can see everything. But I was right outside Lake Zurich, and then I go all the way up here, and then we put the dye in, and then I tried to follow where we thought the dye would be, and I ended up not being able to see it because it came out the other end of the pipe like 45 minutes later, and I was already back in the office. So.
This is directly out of the lake.
Yeah, like this part right here, that's Echo Lake.
Yep.
And so.
Lake Zurich? Is that Echo Lake or Lake Zurich?
That's Echo Lake. I took 3 or 4 different videos, and so with each one, I shrunk the map. So this right here is Echo Lake. So I'm at that northern edge right now. So.
That's Miller Road up on the north end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The creek at Miller Road.
That's where the dye came out eventually.
Yeah. Right where I am right now. That's where the dye came out, I believe.
Yes.
No.
There's a structure right south of that over the road.
Yeah. So. Any more questions? So that's just pictures and video. And then 2D models. I can create contours. I go out with the drone and a GPS, and I GPS certain spots within on the plane, and I have to spray paint or put something there where the drone can see it, and then I put it into an application called Drone-a-Map, and I select those points, and then it creates I can generate contours in a DTM and a DSM, and I can see the elevations of the whole site that I am flying.
Did you do the elevations of the wetland, and what's the elevation difference between Echo Lake and the wetlands upstream?
I looked at the county topography, and there was about a 1 foot differential, but that wasn't, those are using the aerial topography from the maps online. So I don't know if you probably didn't.
No.
We didn't do contours on your flight.
No, I did not. I just flew for photos and video.
But maybe, I don't know, is Ela Town, do you know what that differential might be?
Right now, no.
Okay.
So this is Granwood Park. Early last year, there's still snow on the ground, and those are the generated contours that I got from the flight. And that's also the big picture in the background that I can generate from all the photos that I've taken with the drone. And that's the DTM, and so I can, in my software, I can click and it'll just tell me what the elevation is at that point. That's the software I use. Each blue dot is a picture that I've taken, and the orange lines, I don't know if you can see those. That's my flight path that I was flying. So this property took me like an hour and a half to fly. I did 2 to 3 different flight patterns. And this is just some of the properties that I have to select in order to get the contours and the DTM, DSM. Grandwood Park again. And then in the background, this is the 3D model. I didn't generate it, my predecessor did, of the central permit facility. So if I was in my program, I can twist and tilt and turn to see the different angles of the central permit facility. I can also, let me pull up. Oops. This is another 3D model. Let's see if I can get it to work. This is so someone doesn't have to have my particular program. And I could, let's see if I can do this. You can tilt and zoom in and see the 3D model in a PDF format. So you don't have to have my particular program in order to see a 3D model.
Yes. Question.
Yeah, we have a question.
The dye test, if we can go back on Echo Lake, which seems to be the premise of this discussion, did you get a time from when the dye went in and when the dye was located out on Miller Road?
That was the 45 minutes.
45 minutes.
5 minutes. Do we have a measurement of the length from where the dye went into Miller Road?
1,800 feet, something like that.
Okay. I'm not an engineer, but I think with a calculator back home and a glass of wine, we could figure out the diameter and the flow rate and all that. You probably, come on over, we buy the box.
The wild card.
It's easier, but, I think we could get some ballpark ideas of pipe diameter, flow rates and all the rest, or you've probably already done it.
Not officially.
Not officially, but I think we could get some pretty good ballpark idea on that of what we're talking about.
I think it would be good to go back and look at the basins upstream and downstream again, if you have a snapshot, just so everybody can get a clear understanding of how large the basins are, the wetland areas, and then how wet they really are. Would that help, folks? Because I think we kind of went pretty quick over it. I don't know if you have. Does it help everybody to see those? Just to know what you're dealing with or know what we're draining into? Mary, I'm looking at you specifically. Would that help to get another view of it?
I think so. I mean, the park is flooded, on both sides of the wetland. I mean, the village park is flooded too, all the time. You can't even walk the path.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a good idea to understand the areas.
Could we go back and take do you have a shot of that? Just the overall?
The beginning of your video, Michelle.
Oh, on my video?
Yeah.
I guess just to get an idea of how large that wetland area is coming out of Lake Zurich and then draining towards Echo Lake.
I think if you also look at, like, Echo Lake's level, it hasn't changed according to, I see why it's backing up south of it. We're not any higher or lower. We seem to maintain an equal level. So maybe from the access point, we used to walk around there over the 15 years I've lived there. Water used to flow very freely underneath the street.
Pass the microphone off to
Okay.
the person that
It used to flow very flowly underneath South Lakewood, and you could see it just drain through. Now, it doesn't have that chance. So I don't know what happened, if maybe the elevation just from the homeowners on the one side into the lake directly without going through that pipe. There was overflow anyway, so maybe look there too.
Or the pipe has collapsed or clogged.
Oh, yeah, that's possible. Anyway, I'm done.
I guess a question for Ela Township. That structure that it drains into, from the top of the frame to the water level that it's dropping to, what's that differential? Is it,
Currently, we're underwater where it's dropping in. Like, that's monitored by the village and Ela Township 3 days a week, and where it's currently draining in is consistently underwater. Years ago, we get a rain, those wetlands would fill up and drain down within a couple days. The last 2 years, we haven't seen that. Last year, magically, all the water disappeared for a week, and we were able, with the village, to get out there and do some inspections and find that drain line up by the Lions Drive area and saw the basins there. But we were able just to expose them before it filled back up again. So we weren't able to get engineers out there and do some more inspections on that. So there's definitely something different. The pipe that's draining and handling that water was never intended to do that. So there's a lot of variables.
So I'm sitting here listening to this, and it seems like a big chunk of this area is at the mercy of a pipe that we didn't know was there, but now that we know it's there, we found it. We don't know what shape it's in. We don't know how long it's going to last. We know it's important. What are we going to do if it ever ends up breaking and causing whatever it's going to cause? And we still haven't figured out why the wetlands off Alliance Drive isn't draining. How do we do that? How do we get to that point where we can answer those questions? We have to wait for the pipe to break to come up with a solution, or what?
No, we don't have to wait. And that other exhibit I showed, the one with the effluent line on there, it was hard to see, but south of that structure, it noted that there were breaks in the line. And what might have been working at one time was the wetland was not necessarily draining through that structure, but it was draining through these blowouts. There's like these breaks, and so it doesn't need to fill up to that structure to drop into it. There are these blowouts. We call them blowouts when a tile line.
That doesn't sound good.
It's not, but they happen. So these old lines, they're a life cycle for all infrastructure, and unless it's maintained, then it's going to fail. And these blowouts where the connections were deteriorating, and then you see like the soil just slough off, and you see these holes in the ground. Those holes in the ground might have been serving the purpose to keep the wetland drained, but the holes in the ground, you get erosion and debris, and then they clog up. So maybe what happened, just a hypothesis here, is those blowouts were, working until they clogged up eventually, and now nothing can drain down into the pipe unless it gets through that structure. So my question was, that structure is controlling the water level now. Can that rim elevation of that structure be lowered? And I guess that's a question. If you can lower that rim structure, then that control for the entire wetland complex could then be lowered too. So that's a question.
That is feasible when we get to that stage. Because like you say, from South Lakewood going back towards Lyons, there's several of those inlets. So right now it's coming all the way to the South Lakewood one to drain all that.
Yep.
Can we explore going backwards towards Lyons to get more water in that pipe? It's possible, yes.
But, okay, so if you go back, you're going upstream in the pipe, the pipe might not be functioning. It might be clogged and nothing can drain through there, so it's got to go all the way down to Lyons Drive to get into that manhole. And if that manhole is controlling everything, could the rim be lowered? And then by lowering that, the whole water level control would be lowered as well.
Assuming the bottom of the wetland is given that overland drainage to there.
Right, you got to get to that point. But that's where I think a lot of the flood problems are, or they're everywhere.
It is everywhere in that, the worst part is that Lyons Drive, South Lakewood area, for sure.
So I think that's maybe something to look at as a temporary quick fix to get it to drain down. But that pipe, yeah, I mean, just to wait until it fails is not a good scenario either. So we do want to look at it, and this is part of the process. We're here talking about it. We're getting feedback and input from the residents. And as far as next steps, we'd like to look into this a little more, but I think we should follow up and see what we can do to adjust that structure now. That might provide some temporary relief.
So one more point here. If we know the pipe is old, wouldn't it be smart to at least get an estimate of what it would take to replace it if it's that important, even though it's not doing what it was intended to do? We get that. I mean, we in Lake Zurich, Mike Brown will tell you what waiting on bad infrastructure that's deteriorated over the years will cost us in the long run. It's very expensive, to fix it after it breaks, instead of, we've taken some proactive steps here to reline pipes and replace the old infrastructure. And if that's now a significant part of this stormwater management infrastructure, and I get it's not it's not being used as it was intended, but it appears to be pretty important right now. So I would suggest we start putting some numbers together as to what it would take to even replace it or fix it, and who's going to pay for it. That's the next big thing.
Sharon.
Yeah. Okay.
She's going to talk about that.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.
All right. Did you have anything else, Michelle?
No, I think that was it.
So, Michelle, she did mention her predecessor, and so our first drone pilot, once we were able to, have authorization to fly the drone, which was cool, you always need a spotter, and so I was the spotter, and there was a sinkhole, like a blowout in North Barrington, and couldn't get out there, so I had our other drone pilot fly over there. I said, I want you to go lower. I want to see inside that sinkhole, and he's like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. And I'm like, just do it, So he did, and all of a sudden, on the receiver, you got like an iPad, it just started, like, warning, red lights were flashing. I'm like, what's going on? And the drone got twisted up in a willow tree and smashed and fell, and we busted the drone, but it was still under we had a 12-month warranty. So if you get one, make sure you get the 12-month warranty. And it happened during month 10, so we got a new drone. And then Michelle's out there flying. I said, okay, the first rule of flying the drone is don't listen to me. But then, she's like Maverick. She's like flying through these trees, and I'm like, can you please not do that? She's like, I know what I'm doing, So she's a good pilot. She hasn't crashed yet.
It's not working. It's not. I'm trying to get yours back up, but it's not. It's
Okay.
not working.
So the next speaker, Sharon, we're going to get her presentation up and running, and she's going to cover the grant funding. I don't know if you have any opening comments that you want to make I'll get you started.
So it's nice to see some faces, some familiar faces, and folks that we've worked with. My name is Sharon Osterby, and I am the grant manager for Lake County
Oh, so it's
and
not
for
me?
SMC.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you should be good now. It just takes a while to sync.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, in a broader picture, what kind of funding is available for projects, what types of projects we can get funding for, and just sort of cover what it is that we at SMC are trying to accomplish with bringing in outside funding to solve some of this flooding issues and infrastructure issues. So, just hang on. It's tough to follow the Drone Act always. You know, Kurt hit with all of the technical information, but he did tee it up nicely. He talked about the need for mitigation because, as he stated, rainfall events continue. It's not hard to talk to anybody about this and ask anybody if they're surprised that we're reporting that there's more rainfall. I think generally citizens know about that already. I think they're going there, maybe.
We can get going here.
So one of the other things I wanted to mention, and I'll talk about it a little bit at the end of my presentation, is I did hear concern about water, that there's just more water in the last few years, which certainly could be attributed to infrastructure. But one of the things that we do know is that last year was an extremely wet year. The river levels at the end of last year were still very high and are still high now. And we are getting and pushing out to the public notices about, spring preparedness and flooding, because when you already have saturated soils over a period of time, if you get any kind of rainfall event, snow or rain, it doesn't have anywhere really to go. The soil can't absorb it and take any more. So now you're challenged with, in the past few years, having maybe a drainage issue, but now you've also have wetter than normal conditions. So it's a complicated issue. We try to work at it as best we can with the different programs that we have. One of the other things that I'd like to mention the importance of is that there's a watershed group which puts together a watershed plan, and that does a really good job of identifying not only water quality issues but flooding issues. And at the county level, I administer our all-natural hazard mitigation plan, and this is a requirement for the county in order to receive FEMA funding for flood mitigation. So we update that plan every 5 years. We have an annual meeting, and you can, if you'd like to get on our list, you can and attend one of these meetings. And it offers an opportunity for us to reflect on the past year and what storm events we had, what our flood response might have been. And it's also an opportunity for communities to report changes or progress on some things. One of the things that I feel pretty proud of is that there are a lot of communities that are undertaking buyouts on their own. I don't know if that's me, but certainly the need is there. The microphone, maybe?
Yeah, it's a cell phone next to a mic.
Cell phone up here?
No.
Oh, we don't have a
Well, it stopped, so that's good. So, so we're going to start out with the federal level, and then we're going to drill our way down to the local level on what kind of funding opportunities are out there and what types of projects can be funded. So most of you are aware FEMA is our primary go-to source for federal funding. They have a hazard mitigation assistance program, and under that program there are 3 different types of funding opportunities. There's the HMGP, which if you're not familiar with, that comes only after there's been a major disaster declaration that's declared by the president, which the state of Illinois did receive for last year. When that declaration is made, they do generally open up funding statewide for mitigation projects. So it depends on what kind of damage was done in the disaster and what the level of assistance that's needed, which determines how much funding is available. This year, there's only $6 million available statewide. So the priority will be for projects that were in that declared disaster area. But certainly, there is the opportunity for us, Lake County or municipalities, to submit a grant application for funding. The Flood Mitigation Assistance Program is strictly funded through the NFIP. So if you have flood insurance through the NFIP, your premiums are paying for funding that comes from this program. So one of the conditions of this, to participate in this program, is you do have to have NFIP flood insurance. And the last one is the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program. This program is undergoing a change, and it's going to be transitioned into what they're calling BRIC, which is Building Resilient Infrastructures and Communities. So the government loves acronyms, so it's just another one to get used to. But the good news about this program is it's typically in the past been funded through appropriations in Congress. Now the formula to determine how much funding is available on an annual basis is tied to the year's total disasters, and so that's that's across the country. So it's really opening up a larger pot of money for projects. In the past, we might have had $160 million available through the PDM program, and now there's a potential for, billions of dollars in funding. It is competitive nationwide, and certainly when you put more money out there, you're going to get more applications for projects, but I feel that then there's hope. So I'm going to talk just briefly about each program, some of the requirements. The Pre-Disaster Mitigation Program, and you'll hear people say PDM because it's just much simpler, but that is something that is, the notice of funding opportunity for the federal programs is generally in the fall. October is the opening of the application cycle, and generally you have until maybe the middle of December to submit your grant application to the state. IEMA is the applicant to the federal government, and we are all sub-applicants. So we can submit, but we do submit through the state. They have generally an earlier deadline for which you can submit an application. Again, available statewide. It's competitive nationwide. Generally speaking, for the PDM program, it's focused on, fixing and resolving issues prior to flood damage. So they're not focused on recovery, but they're focused on measures that will prevent flood damages. The match for this is typically, it's a 25% cost share, so 75% funding from FEMA, 25% funding from the local community. And this is considered a non-disaster mitigation grant. And I talked briefly about the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. Again, it's also announced at the same time as the PDM program, and it has the same deadline for submitting your application to the state. Both of these programs put out annually what their funding priorities are. And so, in the past, in years past, the priority has been buyouts because that's kind of a quick win. It's 100% guaranteed to solve a problem because you're simply removing the structure and you're removing the people who are in harm's way. So that's kind of been the go-to and easiest project for people to get implemented. We've done over 200 properties in Lake County since 1993, and I think our first one was with Ela Township way back when. So we did 2 acquisitions there. So this is, again, focused on flood reduction, and the match here can vary. It can go anywhere from 0% to 25%. So if you are considered a severe repetitive loss property or a repetitive loss property, they do reduce the cost share. So it could be a 90-10 split. It could be funded at 100%. And there's also accommodations for small impoverished communities. As I said before, one of the other requirements, I mentioned that the county has this all-natural hazard plan, which makes us eligible for federal funding. But for the FMA program, the community also needs to be a participating NFIP community and in good standing. And the properties do need to be insured through the NFIP. And I say NFIP because there are also write-your-own policies for flood insurance, or policies that are just not written through the National Flood Insurance Program. So they are looked at differently. The HMGP we talked about, that's post-disaster. That's currently has an application, a pre-application that is due February 7th. So if there's an interest for submitting something for your community, now is the time you need to get going. They ask for a pre-application to try to assess what kind of projects are being submitted. When you have an HMGP grant, that's only competitive within the state of Illinois. So even though it's $6 million, which isn't a big pot of money, the competition is a little bit smaller, so you're not fighting states that have hurricanes and wildfires and other natural disasters. This, again, is a 75-25% split, and it can address a variety of types of projects. I'm going to go into that a little bit here in a second. Oh, there it is. So these are some of the types of projects that are eligible for funding through the various programs. Sorry, my little thumbs up guys are faint on the screen. But generally speaking, generators are not funded under the flood mitigation program. And technical assistance is one of the things that's funded under the flood mitigation program. The reason for that, the technical assistance component, is they have kind of moved into community-based projects. So Echo Lake is a great example of a flood mitigation project that would address a community as opposed to a house here and a house there. So the focus of the past few years has been moving towards those community-type projects that reduce flood damages for a number of people. And in the past 3 years, the priorities for buyouts have been number 4 and number 5 on the list. And so that means that the federal government will fund projects that fall in all of the other priorities up till 4, and they'll just keep funding until they run out. So you can understand the challenge of trying to get funding for a buyout when you're number 5 on the list, and those houses that qualify for that number 4 and number 5 spot have to be those severe repetitive loss properties. So it's a challenge, but there are other programs that we also look at to try to supplement funding for our buyout program, and I'll talk about those as well. But you can see that there are flood risk reductions, there's structural and non-structural retrofitting, there's dry flood proof measures that you can apply for funding for, stream stabilization, infrastructure. A lot of projects are eligible under these programs. This is an example of what a community flood mitigation project type might look like. It's talking about stream and floodplain restoration. There's some infrastructure in there. There's some channel work being done. There's wetland restoration. So there is a wide variety of types of projects that can be funded. Again, talking about the cost share differences, generally, for planning purposes, you can try to work towards the 25% and hope for the best that you can reduce it somewhat. And there are a lot of collaborative ways to achieve that 25% cost share. There's in-kind services that a community can contribute. There's property owners can contribute, or it can be a multi-jurisdictional project where there's multiple entities that contributes, a share of it to try to get that 25% cost share. And FEMA programs are generally reimbursement programs. We're very, very fortunate in Lake County. When we apply for grant funding and receive it, the county allows us to, they authorize an emergency appropriation for that full dollar amount so that we can start the project and spend it. That's a big challenge for a lot of communities who don't have that upfront pot of money to fund a project. So that is one of the benefits of working through us through Lake County. So I mentioned that there's state funding, and it's now available. It has been available for the past 2 years, but prior to that, because of our budget constraint, this funding wasn't available. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources Office of Water Resources has their own flood mitigation program. It's not a grant program, although it operates much like one in that it's a reimbursement program, and they fund similar projects. But there's some very unique differences between this and, let's say, the HMGP program through FEMA. So this tends to be a little bit more flexible. And I'll go through some of those differences here, and it'll help you understand. So one of the things I mentioned is you needed to have a mitigation program for FEMA. You don't need to have that flood hazard mitigation program for IDNR. For HMGP, there's a cost share. For IDNR, you can get up to 100% funding. They can also, I can't see that, that's far away. They don't do elevations, so there's a few caveats. They don't do elevations, but they do also use the same benefit cost analysis that FEMA does. And I think anybody knows when you're doing any kind of project, we would love to rip out, drain the lake and put in a new pipe, and it would be great. The reality is, that's probably a really expensive project, and so, there are challenges with that, but nonetheless, trying to get 100% funding for something like that might be a solution. So we do utilize both of these programs, sometimes at the same time. Sometimes I submit the same project to both. It's become a challenge over the past few years because we've had a lot more natural disasters. There's a lot more demand for funding. People are very aware of what their limitations are with their infrastructure. There are, homeowners and residents who are also challenged with their own individual issues, and everybody's trying to find a solution and wants one, but the money is just not always there. So we try to, at Lake County, manage and utilize as much of the funding opportunities that we can to try to address as many of the problems that we can. So we've had a period of relative dry spell for grants, and it's sort of cyclical because when you apply for funding, it's a year before you get that funding, and then it's another 2 years to complete your project. So there's often a 3-year swing between grant award and receiving other funding. But we nonetheless still apply annually for all of the programs that are available. This year we'll be demolishing, we've already taken out 4 properties, but we'll be demolishing another 23 this year, which is really big. We haven't had that kind of activity in a while, so we've been able to secure over $7 million in funding for buyouts. And as I mentioned, it's great. There's 2 local sources at the top that were completed in Waukegan and Lakeville Township. So there are entities out there that are still plugging away on their own. They didn't utilize any state or federal funding, but funded it with multiple jurisdictions. You can see that we have a grant from FEMA for $1.5 million for 4 structures. And then we utilized the IDNR OWR flood mitigation program for 2 grants, and that is the lion's share of the properties that we'll be acquiring, and that's funded at 100%. This is some of the locations of those buyouts this year, so if you're driving around and you see me out in the street with a hard hat and a construction equipment, I promise I'm not driving the equipment, though I would like to. But we'll be doing some demolitions this year, so it'll be a busy year for us. SMC also has programs that we have available for HOAs and for communities that we try to help partner with to address some of those localized flooding issues. I think many of you in here, I know some of you are. Tower Lakes is here. We've worked with Tower Lakes extensively and provided funding to help them address some of their flooding issues. We've worked with Flint Creek on some other projects as well. So, in Lake Zurich, we've got projects with Lake Zurich too. So I'm going to go over really briefly just a little bit about what the programs are and what kind of funding is available. Unfortunately, we don't have a huge bucket of money, but if you can see up here, I know it's kind of hard, but we separate funding by watershed. So each watershed gets some money for projects each year. And in August, we have an RFP that goes out, and it talks about, how to apply, what kind of materials you need to submit. It's really intended to be for, somebody who doesn't have grant writing experience. It's not intended to be a difficult process. Our staff takes the time to meet with individuals to help them develop a project. If they need our assistance, we offer our technical assistance as well. But you can see that we received 15 projects, and the combination total cost is $5 million. That's quite a big chunk of money. And they were looking for $397,000. And the reality is we selected 7 projects for $4 million, almost $4.5 million, and we had 182,760. Now this was for 2019. We've just gone through our process for 2020. But you can see, there's some marks on the map there where project locations are and the types of projects. I'm going to give you a little information on some of those types of projects. Again, the funding purpose and goal for the Watershed Management Board, which we'll fondly refer to as WMB, is flood damage reduction. That's the primary component of the grant. So if you have a project that's focused on flood damage reduction, you can consider submitting something for this. The secondary is water quality improvement and ecosystem restoration. So if you have a project that might be a little of both of those things, then you'll probably do pretty well. And these projects, the only thing we don't allow are projects that are required to be completed that are part of permit or for compliance. Those are not eligible. So this is one of the projects that we funded in 2019. It was the Open Lands Conservation at Home. And this was a unique project in that they had an intense focus in the Riverwoods, Lincolnshire, Libertyville, and Meadowa area. And so what they do is, it's an aggressive public outreach to help homeowners deal with nuisance flooding in their yard, and some of the ways that they can address that through, green infrastructure, through landscaping, and other various measures. So you can see at the bottom of this picture here, hang on, oops, I probably just advanced my slide. This was a dry swale that they installed here to try to, to mitigate some of that drainage that's coming through their property. They've planted some trees, and the picture in the top right is just the door-to-door effort that they undertook to roll out this program. This doesn't like me here. Oh, now I went past. Okay. Well, now I'm really lost in the weeds here. I don't think I can go back, can I? Oh, dear. We'll get there, don't worry. Almost. So I mentioned WMB, which is our Watershed Management Board program, but we also have what's called a SURF program, another acronym. It's the Stormwater Infrastructure Repair Fund. And this is another smaller pot of money that's available. But typically, we receive requests for assistance or projects for the SURF program, and they usually come in at the same time as the WMB program. These are really more geared towards infrastructure, but certainly not water quality, and there's a little more eligibility requirements that go into being approved for a project like this. But again, limited funding. There's always more demand for funding than there is enough funding to go around. But if you can see on the map, you can kind of see where we've had some of these projects this past, in 2019. We've had about $202,000 in projects. This is an example of one of the SURF infrastructure projects. This was Chickamauga Drive in Long Grove, and you can see they had some pretty significant drainage issues. And so working with the village, we were able to provide a cost share to help them implement this project. But this is a good example of what a SURF project is. It's stormwater infrastructure. Well, I want to tell you about this, but I wanted to tell you about something else first. But we'll go with this. So I've kind of given you the from the top down how we can try to approach finding money to mitigate for flood damages. Some of it's geared towards just your home, which is kind of through the buyout program. Some of it's community level, and certainly opportunities for your HOA to try to perhaps submit for a project to address, maybe a neighborhood level project. But one of the things that I wanted to mention, and I touched on it briefly at the beginning, is the saturation of the soil right now and the high water levels. I see it when I drive through the county. A lot of the detention basins, they're really full, more than usual. The ground is saturated, and so there's been a pretty aggressive public awareness campaign coming from the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, from FEMA, from our partners at IDNR and other agencies throughout the state, that this spring, be prepared for flooding because of that saturation from last year and because those river levels are high. One of the best, most effective ways that you can protect yourself is to have flood insurance. Most of the damage that occurs to property is property that's located in what's called the Zone X, which is outside of the 100-year floodplain. So just because you don't live in a floodplain doesn't mean you don't need insurance. It's certainly a time to think about it is now, because you have to have it in place for 30 days before you can file a claim. So this little graphic here, I could have made it a little larger, but 1 inch of water is about $25,000 of damage. And I know, I'm sure some of you folks have experienced flooding. An inch of water doesn't seem like a lot, but it sure is, and it does add up. So certainly consider it. You can if you're in unincorporated areas, you can contact our folks down at our public building and planning department. They can guide you on insurance. You can contact your local insurance broker. And I think Kurt's going to talk a little bit about maybe some other flood proofing measures that you can take to try to at least address some of it on your own, at your own home. This just gives you a a perspective of what claims, flood insurance claims look like over the years. So Kurt talked about the rainfall and the average and how that data is, calculated. And you can see that some of this data goes back quite a ways. I think they started keeping those records in 1978. But the trend is not going down. So the damages are increasing, the frequency of rain is increasing, the intensity is increasing, and I think the number one thing I hear from homeowners is, I never had water like this in my house before, or I never had flooding in my yard, and it seems like I've had it several times this year. So, for those of you out there who feel the same way, you're not alone. If you're interested in participating in a buyout with us, I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. You can send me an email. You should know that once you're on our list, I will continue to look for funding for you until either you decide you don't want to participate or I'm able to find funding. But there's currently about 120 people that are on my list right now. And again, I know we talked about all of the different programs, and each program has their priorities. So it's a challenge. It's a long process. It's not a one-day fix, and it's never a it's never a guarantee. But we do keep working at it. I think we have been relatively successful in trying to help those that have the most severe issues. And unfortunately, when I say what's most severe for one person is probably your opinion of what's most severe for you, and it's true because it's a difficult thing to go through. So just know that we do work with different programs and that they all have different requirements, and so we just try to find the best match for everybody. So contact your insurance agent. If you're not in the floodplain, it'll be cheaper. And it's always a good thing to have. Also, you can get a basement backup sewer rider policy too, and that helps cover some of the contents if they're lost in the basement. As I mentioned before, the 30-day waiting period is probably the most important point. But really, when they try to determine what your premium costs are, it's based on the size of your house, it's based on the location of your house to the floodplain. It's risk driven. So if you're in a risky area, chances are your insurance premiums will be higher. If you're in a lower risk area, then they'll be lower. That's all I have. That was an abrupt ending. Does anybody have any questions for me? Yes.
Question: how do you know if you're in you mentioned flood or zone X? How do you know if you're in a zone X?
Well, there's a couple of ways. You can ask this fine gentleman here from Lake Zurich. If you live in Lake Zurich, you can use our Maps Online program, which is really, really useful tool. Kurt, are you going to demonstrate that? Great. So he's going to show you how you can check where your property is at in relation to the floodplain. A lot of people use this tool when they're shopping for a house. So you want to make sure you know before you buy.
So if you just go to any internet browser, type in Lake County Maps, so we'll start there. And then just click the Lake County Maps Online. And it's going to launch this application. And the trick to this application is there's lots of information there. So, you need to know what to turn on. And
how many folks have used our Maps Online?
Yep.
All right.
Good.
Okay, great.
So once you launch into the application, we're going to just put in an address. I guess I can do, well, what's the address here? 70 East Main. Or you can zoom in and look for it as well. So here we are at Village Hall. Click and drag around. Let's go over by the lake. Right here. Now what you want to do is go to the top menu bar here, and you'll see this layer list. It looks like 3 sheets of paper on top of each other. You open that. Now you're getting this long list of layers. Like, okay, well, what do I want to turn on? You want to turn on the National Flood Hazard layer. And what this is doing is it's reaching out to the FEMA layer. It's importing that. So that's going to be dropped down on here. And it takes a while because it's not something within the county information system. It's reaching out to FEMA. And it's the most laggiest layer out there, so it takes a while. The other thing you can do is if you look at this 4 square box, that's where you can change the base map. So right now, you have this general map. We can turn on an aerial photo from 2018. We can turn on a bunch of aerials looking in the past, all the way back to 1939. So in 1939, that's what Lake Zurich looked like. And then what I noticed was, if you go back to this 1840 plat, that's what I saw. Oh my God, what did I do? Impassable Cedar Lake. Yeah. And the FEMA layer is still not up.
Can't let it lie.
And this is all available to the public, so there's a lot of cool information you can find about your property and what's going on around the county.
And the flood hazard layer.
I know, and it's not popping yet. Maybe I gotta zoom in more.
It might be broken. It was broken yesterday.
So if you do go on the site and you click on the National Flood Hazard layer, it's going to show you graphically what that looks like, and you can find your house and it'll tell you Zone X, Zone AE, and that'll help you understand where you're at. And certainly, you know, I can give you my card and we can go through it together if you like. I'm happy to show you. Yeah.
Kurt, this is dynamically linked with FEMA.
It is.
It is.
So
Yeah.
sometimes you can go directly to their streaming layer, and it's sometimes a little faster because it doesn't have a connection through Lake County. It's one less feed.
Sometimes.
Here's another one. You can go to Illinois Flood Maps, and it's through their website. But we'll follow. If you have questions, please follow up with us. We can help point you in the right direction. Any other questions? Well, we're right at near the 2-hour mark, so I think for the presentations we're gonna end it there, and we're happy to answer any other general questions or specific questions, or we'll hang out afterwards too if you want to stop by and let us know any information you want to have us look into. But the Echo Lake drain, that is something that we want to continue to look at. We're going to follow up with the township, and I'm going to go out there and take a look at that structure. And I hope that, you always be able to wake up and look out at that lake, for the near future.
Kurt, could we take just a couple minutes and give some, examples of what folks could do to protect their property, whether it's sandbags, keeping drains clear around their properties, not bringing in fill, regrading your property without coming in for a permit, something that's, working with the system, instead of working against the system?
Sure. So I was going to...
While you set that up, I think Lisa had a question.
Lisa?
Yeah, just for the park people that live on the park adjacent to the wetland. So if there was some wetland restoration to increase holding capacity that would help solve your park flooding issues, that would be an appropriate grant project,
If it
correct?
for the WMB, certainly if it demonstrates flood damage reduction. I would say for the larger programs, you'd want to go bigger. You'd want to do.
Right.
I mean, like this Echo Lake project is a great example of a community flood mitigation project. And And certainly, that's something that, I'm sure we'll be discussing at some point, but,
So I guess my part two to that question is, how much have you looked into the storage capacity of that wetland? Is there any opportunity to increase that?
We have not. So that is on our radar. As the folks here at the said, that's going to be a priority for us, both with Echo Lake, Hilo Township and Lake Zurich, to take a look at that.
and just to add on, a lot of times when we do submit these larger projects to FEMA or to the state, it does require this cost-benefit analysis to make sure that it's, it's going to bring more value than the cost. And part of that requirement also is, some sort of an H&H study or, engineering and design work to try to identify really what's going to solve that problem. And that's part of that project process.
So, can you hear me? Yep. Okay. I know we're fighting the time right now, but I'll run through these pretty quick. And, normally when we look at a drainage problem, you can try to, fight the symptoms and, reinforce your basement and let the water keep, pouring into your basement. Or the better approach is to first identify, where's the water coming from? You want to keep the water away from the home in the first place. And so I guess just starting from the top down, this slide shows our flood protection tip. So gutters and downspouts, the water that hits your roof, if that's not collected and diverted away from your roof, it's just going to run off and against your foundation. And it's not that much water, but if your yard is not draining away and your gutters aren't large enough and your downspouts aren't in the right locations, those can all be adjusted. So gutters can be increased, gutters can be pitched in different directions, downspouts can be diverted away from a certain area. So that's, we're starting at the top, we're working our way down. The next is your yard. So if you walk around your perimeter of your foundation of your home or whatever building it is, foundations settle over time. And, and initially there's a settlement, and then over time they continue to settle. And you might see it where your foundation is like underground now, and your siding's like right at the base of the yard. And so over time, you might have this back-pitched area, and water, you know how gravity works. Water's going to back up and pool and sit there against your foundation. So yard grading and positive slope, and that's pretty easy to identify. You just walk around the perimeter of your house. You know where those ponding areas are, and you might need to hopefully be able just to grade it out and get it away from your house. Sometimes you don't have that opportunity where you can grade out the yard, so that's where you put in a drain. There's different types of yard drains, French drains, storm sewers. They're all basically the same thing. They're conveying water underground, but the size of those systems vary. So if you can't get it to drain out overland, get it to drain out underground, and that's where you put in a pipe system. Temporary and permanent barrier systems. So now we're talking about large amounts of water. If you live in a floodplain or near a floodplain or a street that floods, and you're not going to be able to drain it out, you need to protect your home. You need to protect your building. And there's different ways of putting in these barrier systems. There can be temporary, where you're doing sandbagging. And the key to sandbagging is you want to do the minimum as possible. So you don't want to sandbag more than you have to. So find out where those critical areas are where water's going to come in, and create a barrier around a door, a window well, wherever that low entry is. What you see on the top there, that's in the village of Gurnee. They put in Jersey barriers, so those large concrete dividers that you see on highways. Line those up, threw in some waterproof plastic, and dropped some sandbags on top of it. Those were quickly deployable. Filling sandbags and throwing sandbags, it's a large labor-intensive effort, where this was rapidly deployed. The lower left corner is a permanent wall. So you can do a landscape wall, very decorative, where it looks like it's just a nice natural feature in your yard landscape, but actually serves the purpose of, preventing floodwaters to back up into the property. Lower right corner, there's a sandbag levee system, and the key to the one in the lower right corner, in the upper left corner, you see those pumps. You want water to actually infiltrate into the protection zone. You want to know where that weak point is. That way you can control water and pump it out. If you plug up those weak points, the weak points are going to be somewhere else. So it's good to have a controlled weak point so you can pump those out. There's other systems out there. There's some links in here that'll be in the presentation. Now, these are going to be more costly. You see a lot of corporations that put these in so they can drive equipment in and out, but have a more fortified enclosure system. Rapidly deployable technology. There's just a list. I'll let you guys explore these if you feel like you want these for your properties. Sewer backup, that's a big one. So if water can get into the sewer, water can back up into your basement. And the water that's backing up is not always clean stormwater. It's the sewage also. So there's different backflow preventers, standpipes, different things you can do in the basement. Overhead sewers, they're costly, but they work. So it's just how much human intervention do you want to have? You have peace of mind where if you're on vacation, you don't have to worry about it, or you want to know that you have to be home, you have to install the standpipe. So there's different types of backflow prevention devices you can install on the sanitary service. This diagram here shows a common type of flooding, which is overland flooding. So if you're in a floodplain, water will back up. As you can see on the upper right, the yard is sloping towards the home, not away from it. The backfill around the foundation is getting saturated. The footing drain is getting saturated, so water can just permeate through the foundation. If you can get the water away from the house to begin with, that's the best approach. Other type of flooding is groundwater infiltration. So you're not getting as much surface water, but you're getting groundwater. And this is common in areas where even new homes were built near wetlands. So there's a lot of wetland areas, a lot of hydric soils. The soil is saturated. The water table is only a few feet deep. And so if you dig down, you have this constant hydrostatic water trying to work its way into your basement. And so you can seal the basement, you can put in more pumps, and I'm sure some of you, or you might know people, that some pumps are running constantly. So that's the groundwater infiltration. And we touched on sewer backup. Same thing, water's getting into the sanitary sewer, making its way into the basement. So a home that's protected from flooding, we'll just start at the top right. It's got a gutter and downspout extension that gets the water from the roof away from the home. And I've been asked, well, how far do you want it to get it away? Well, you want to get it away where you can find some positive grade, either in a ditch or a pipe or something that'll keep carrying it away from the home. You just don't want it to drain right there next to your foundation, and it's going to drain into your sump pump. Your sump pump's going to discharge it. It's going to be a never-ending cycle. That water just keeps cycling itself. The other thing you see right below the downspout extension is a clay cap. So around there you can build up some positive grade. There's clay everywhere in Lake County, so you can probably get some from your yard, cap it off and slope it away from your yard. This one has a sump pump with the sump pump discharge also extending away from the foundation. There's backwater valves in there to prevent sewer backup, and let's see what else they've got there. The sump pump lines, you also might want to have a battery backup system. So if there's a power failure, you have another pump that can kick on during those events when you don't have power. This was a home that I inspected from the 2017 flood, and they invested a lot of money where they weren't treating the water at the source. They were just, the water was coming up against their basement. So on the inside, they put in steel beams, because when water's heavy and saturated soil is heavy, and when that's working against your foundation is fighting that, and it's going to crack and buckle. So they put in steel beams to reinforce the concrete wall so it won't break anymore. They excavated a trench around the foundation where they're going to install a drain tile. On the inside, you can see here, this is the steel beam, and they lag it into the floor joist and tighten it up so it creates a rigid support to support the concrete, and so it won't buckle anymore. Here are these anchor plates. So the same thing, you're trying to support the load or counteract the forces on your basement by putting in these plates. And then what's on the other side, on the outside, are these tie-back rods. And these rods are anchored into the soil outside your home, and they're resisting that weight. You're pulling it back in the other direction to try to fight the pressure that's exerted on the concrete. They drilled a hole for the window well, and then they're bringing water from the outside back into the home, which is not really a great idea. Here's those tiebacks. You can see those rods on those plates in there, so they're pulled. And then the upper left corner, you can see an anchor plate that gets buried in the yard, and then it's on a threaded system, so you can start tightening it up. And the window well with the drain pipe, that looks good, but the drainage is coming back into the house, which I don't think is a great idea. Now on the inside, you can have the perimeter drainage system as well. So in this case, they saw cut a perimeter trench to the basement floor slab and put in a pipe with some aggregate. So basement floor, you open it up and put in a pipe, just like a drain tile on the outside of your footing. This is on the inside in your basement slab. Then you sealed it all up. You have your crack sealing, you have your anchor plates, you have your drainage from the window well coming in, and crack sealing, structural reinforcements, window well drain pipe, interior drain. And then what you don't see is this monster dual sump. They had big 2 sump pumps with battery backups, and altogether they spent over $100,000 on all that. When I took a look at it, you know, the water's coming from somewhere, and there could have been some yard grading and some diversion to get the water away from the house to begin with. All those efforts to reinforce the basement, you know, they're temporary. You know, water's going to find its next weak point. So instead of allowing the water to get close to the home, first try to keep it away from the home to begin with. So that was just quick. There's more information on that, and we'll post it on our website, make it available. So those are like home floodproofing tips that you can use. So we kind of went through a lot of information today, and we do a lot of these workshops. We do have some more coming up this year, so just if you're interested in attending more of our workshops, feel free to check out our website. We'll stick around for any other questions, but thanks again to Faye and the Watershed Partnership and Mike Brown with the village. The Echo Lake thing, we're definitely going to keep looking at that.
You can wait.
Thank you.